Do you have a habit of worrying? Over small things? Or over big things? Medium-sized things? Worry is the habit of dwelling on something in a negative way, or being fixated on our fears and our troubles and difficulties. A number of studies have shown that about 90% of what we spend time worrying about or fearing never actually ends up happening. Does it work that way for you? Which means that most of our worries, if this is true, and most of our fears are, from a factual standpoint, unfounded, unneeded, and unhelpful, but they still burden us. And Jesus seems to understand this deeply. So Jesus teaches us, do not worry. Or sometimes he says, do not be afraid. Jesus teaches us that worry and fear can hold us back, can stunt our spiritual growth. And most of us can see how worry can undermine our spiritual journey and why it might be something that Jesus would need to address. Yet telling ourselves to stop worrying is like telling yourself to relax. Does that work? It's not that easy, right? And Jesus so he talks about it a lot. And he starts in today's passage by addressing our basic human needs to make his point, saying, don't worry about what you eat or drink or what you wear. Now, how we hear this has a lot to do with our status, right? Our personal situation. If someone lacks proper food and drink and is worried if they're going to have enough to survive, I haven't eaten in 3 days. That's really a different situation than someone who's fussing over which food option might be best. I mean, there's a big difference between being worried over whether I can have steak tonight or chicken versus someone who's got no money, someone who's worried there won't be any food at all. So which of these do you think Jesus' lesson applies to? Maybe both. I don't know. Both situations. Even though it's really different situations, it's way harder to avoid worrying when you're hungry, when your life is at risk due to inadequate resources. But by using the example of worrying about what we will eat or drink, our basic human needs, Jesus is partially indicating that worry is something that presents a challenge for all people from all walks of life. Worry is a big part of our lives, so big that we can actually take it for granted. We worry without even realizing we're doing it, much less realizing how harmful it is. We might not notice that we're having problems with worry until our worry grows to the point that it seems beyond our control. If we're not careful, our worry can grow to the point that it makes it hard to sleep, hard to eat. As our minds fixate on something, as we stew in our worries and our fears. In a way, obsessive worrying is like praying for something we don't want because we're spending so much of our mental time and energy on it. We can get caught up in going over negative scenarios or negative conversations again and again in our head. Oh, this is what I'd say if I had a chance to say that again. To the point of pushing out healthy ideas, even losing our peace of mind, even losing our ability to experience joy in life because we're spending time on this. And many of us have spent so many years dwelling on our troubles that our worry can turn into anxiety and it can even take on a life of its own. Now, before I go any further, I want to caution everyone that if our worries get to the point of anxiety attacks, it's best to seek professional help and to be wary of simple solutions. Clinical depression and panic or anxiety disorders are illnesses and the kind of thing we should seek help with, outside help. A mental illness is not necessarily our fault any more than any other disease. But at the same time, anxiety disorders can be caused by out-of-control worry. That can happen. It's happened to me. If I start worrying about things, I start to experience anxiety. But it's not the only cause. It's really important to understand that. Chemical imbalances, traumatic stress, and other causes are also common. So we shouldn't be ashamed to seek professional, medical, or psychological counseling and treatment for clinical depression or anxiety attacks, nor should we assume such anxiety attacks are because we're thinking wrong or because we're lacking spiritually. Now, while all those things are true, nonetheless, there is an opportunity for us to heal in this area, all of us. What I'm talking about today is worrying as a way of thinking, as a way or the manner in which we use our mental energy and our resources. Because that's at least to the degree that we can do something about it. And while worrying is a psychological problem, it can also be a spiritual problem big enough that Jesus had to address it many times with his disciples. Jesus had to offer, stop worrying. Why are you worried about that again? Trust me. There can be a direct connection between our excessive worry and our ability to trust God. Do you see that connection? Now, not all worry or fear is bad, right? This is complicated, right? Worry can have a positive impact when it drives us to take needed actions in our lives. And when we take those actions quickly, our worries are put to rest. That's okay. That's normal. That's spiritually healthy. But while worrying can jolt us into action, ironically, it can have the opposite effect as well, actually inhibiting our action. Has that happened to you? When you're worried about so much that it turned you into a nervous wreck to the point that you couldn't even address it or talk about it? Jesus teaches us that we can learn to trust God more deeply to the point where worry doesn't become obsessive, where worry doesn't drag us down spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And part of trusting God is knowing and just being with God in the present moment. Part of trusting God, loving God, is the realization that you are always standing in the presence of God. Worry, on the other hand, takes us away from that. Worry takes us from whatever's going on in the here and now and causes us to focus on the future or maybe on the past in a fearful and negative way. Finding a way out of the worry habit is tricky, and it is something that is helpful to us no matter whether we have struggled with mental illness in this area or not, or where we're at on our spiritual journey. And we can easily fool ourselves into thinking we don't worry when we actually do. Right? Humans are also masters of denial. So it takes a certain amount of self-awareness and spiritual maturity to recognize that our worry is causing a problem, because we so easily take worry for granted. Isn't that just normal to worry? Well, not according to Jesus. If we feel our worries are getting the best of us, what can we do? Since worry is dwelling on something that is negative, one way to address worry is to catch ourselves. It's to notice when we're doing that and make a point of dwelling on positive things instead. To maybe stop and meditate on the presence of God. Jesus teaches us to dwell on God in the present moment. So a great place to start, maybe even every day when you get up in the morning, is to spend 10 or 15 minutes doing that. Dwelling on God, whether that's reading scripture, focusing on love, being thankful, rather than focusing on our worries and fears. We do it first thing in the morning as practice so that we can continue likely to do it during the day, or if we catch ourselves worrying about something. Dwelling on God is ideally what we're doing when we engage in spiritual practices, coming to church, doing meditation, prayer, music, reading scripture. Being thankful to be alive is another practice that naturally flows from focusing on God. Do you ever do that when you're in the middle of being worried, that you Decide to be thankful instead. It's a powerful technique. The old saying, count your blessings, but deeper than that, deeper than just count them. Appreciate them. We begin to deal with worry after we learn to pay attention to it, to listen to our own worries in new ways. And then from there, we can take steps to control our worries rather than our worries controlling us. Yet often one of the biggest reasons we can't meditate, that we can't spend time with God, is we can't engage in prayer, is that our worries distract us from that effort. Has that ever happened to you? You try to sit down quietly with God, and as soon as you do, all these thoughts keep pouring into your head. You want to think about and try to listen for God's love, but your mind has got other ideas. We feel the need to get up and stop meditating and go work on these things, right? Stop wasting time and go do something. If this happens every time we meditate, it's a powerful indication that our worries are maybe a little out of control, or that at least they're not being addressed. And when our worries repeatedly interrupt our meditation and prayer, please also understand that they're likely also interrupting the rest of our lives as well. One way to process and to learn about our worries is to contemplate worry as part of our meditation. For example, when you sit down to meditate, have a pad of paper handy, and as you're trying to contemplate in prayer, as you're trying to reach for God's love, and you get distracted, write down what distracted you, and then go back to meditating. Write it down and set it aside. By writing it down, then you'll know that you'll remember later to think about it, if it's something you do need to think about it, so you can just be focused on love. Whenever you notice you're no longer focused on God, write down why. The idea of putting it down on paper is powerful. It gets the worry out of your head, at least for a moment. Most of us will find that our thoughts wander often. And that sometimes it's miscellaneous, non-repeating things. And other times it's something that keeps coming up. It's the things that keep coming up that we have to deal with first. The repeated mental interruptions are the things that we're fixated on. So those need to be our starting point. Because it's those repeated worries that more than anything else rob us of our peace. So writing down a worry is just one step. Writing it down, seeing it, opens the door to a deeper understanding in and of itself. Then once we've identified something that's worrying us, or something that we're dwelling on that's not helpful, the next step is to ask yourself, does this make sense? Does this worry make sense? Why am I dwelling on this? This is an important step because it's vital to understand if our worry or our fear is rational or not. As I already mentioned, many of our worries are not rational. We should expect the answer to be to be, in a lot of cases, no, this really doesn't make sense. For each worry, ask yourself, is this something I can, from a practical perspective, address this? Can I fix this or not? Am I worried about something that I can't fix? Because if we're worried about something that we can't do anything about, we need a way to figure out how to stop doing that. Because we're really just wasting our mental energy, and we're damaging ourselves. If we're worried about something we can't do anything about. On the other hand, what if you're worried about something you can do about? You can do something about. What if there's something important we could be doing that you've been putting off? Maybe I need to stop smoking or need to talk to my friend about his drinking, whatever it is. If it's something we can address, taking action and dealing with what's driving that worry should resolve it, right? You stop worrying about what you're going to say to somebody after you've gone ahead and said something to somebody. So when a worry comes up, said something to somebody in a loving way. When a worry comes up in your meditation that's something you can take positive action on, write it down, maybe even pick a time to contemplate, to meditate on what action is best to take, talk to some friends about it, and then as a step, take that step so that you deal with that worry. And then let go of it and refocus on the present moment. Refocus on an experience of love in the here and now. Now, that will only work if the worry that's distracting us from our meditation or from whatever we're doing is actually something we can take effective action on. But what do we do when we can't? What about when we can't do anything about a particular worry, but it keeps bugging us? What if we sit down to meditate and our mind dwells or worries or is fearful and it's totally out of our control or mostly out of our control? Like say we're worried about war or world hunger or other very rational things, but things that are totally out of our control. Or even deeper, what do we do when we're worried about our own death or the death of somebody around us? Death is a really common worry or fear. One that a lot of times underlies our other worries and fears. And it's rational to be fearful of death because it's going to happen one day. You, me, everyone we know will die and we'll hand all this on to the next generation. That's how it works, right? A lot of our worries, the thoughts that interrupt us when we try and meditate, can sometimes be traced back to this one big fear if we've not addressed it, our fear of death. When Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow, Jesus is also trying to address our fear of death. Our fear, our worries surrounding death can interfere with our relationship with God and our relationship with reality. If we can't trust God with our death, what can we trust God with? Sure, there's some things we can do about our fear of death, right? We can take care of ourselves, we can make good choices, and we should, of course, do those things. Absolutely. But while healthy living will lead to a better life, maybe a longer life, it will not protect us from one day having to experience this reality ourselves. For worries like that, worries we really can't do anything about, such as death, ideally we learn to trust God, to trust the universe with that instead of worrying. To develop an ability to say, God, I'm just going to trust you with that whenever you feel this fear of death, and let it go. To trust God so deeply that it frees us from worrying about death. Much of the Bible and many of Jesus' teachings are about this, about freeing us from our fear of death so we can live as an expression of love. That level of trust is at the core of Christ's teachings that we heard this morning, learning to trust God with that is out of our control, with rational things, but things that we really can't do anything about. It's an important step along our spiritual journey, one that may take our entire lives to address, or that we may always be working on. When we trust God, when we trust Jesus deep enough, our fear of death will be impacted in very effective ways. Now, this is not like a quick or easy answer. It's a process. Trust in God takes time. Trust is an aspect of a healthy relationship, and it needs to be developed and practiced repeatedly. Our ability to trust in God is directly connected to our ability to love God. Building our ability to trust God with things outside of our control is a process that can start with taking our worries and our fears seriously and working to address them. One thing I do when I find worries interrupting my life is I just hand them over to God. Just let go. And if I can't do that, I at least share them. This is part of what meditation and contemplation are about, is to do this, to spend time, to set aside time to deal with this. Think about it. If there's nothing we can do about something, then it's already in God's hands. We just need to admit the truth of the matter, right? We need to understand our own natural limits and boundaries. And this is a deeply powerful aspect of our faith. Admitting the truth in a deep and impactful way that hopefully deals with our tendency to worry and brings us peace. handing over our fears and worries to God is part of the truth that sets us free. The truth that can free us of our fears and our worries so we can experience love, peace, joy, so we can experience a life of gratitude. Turning a worry over to God won't necessarily address it your first attempt. Right? This is something you do over and over again. I mean, maybe it will. But because our worries, we fixate them and they repeat, we have to hand them over to God and trust God with them repeatedly as well. And ultimately, as we see our faith grow, our trust in God increases, our worries decrease, and we become more rational, and life becomes easier to deal with. It's a process. It's like a lot of little bitty leaps of faith. Many little leaps of trust that build one on another into a healthy, trusting relationship with God and with creation. And Jesus is here to guide us. Jesus who counsels us, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow's got plenty of worries of its own. Today's trouble is enough. These were important teachings for Jesus' first disciples as well, and they're important for us today, as important as they ever were, as we seek God's love and peace in our modern world. In a world of ever-emerging fears and worries, Jesus' teachings are always with us. Jesus himself is always eternally present during the day, during the night. Christ's hands outstretched in a voice that reminds us, don't worry, trust me. Trust God.